So, before I talk about the content of the witness expert report, I would first of all want to talk about the fraud examination report content. When I finish with the fraud examination report content, I'll go to the content of an internal audit report content. Why it is important to talk about these two reports is because it will be used as the basis of what a expert witness report content is. So we will finish off with the expert witness report. But before doing that, let's talk about the elements of a fraud examination report. Remember what I've just discussed, I always put the references, so at the end of my presentation, I have the references attached. So here, fraud examination report is basically a report where forensic accountants, they compile their reports on. So the content will start off with an address section, whom the report is from. So it's basically trying to put together the expertise that are involved in the report and who the report is addressed to. So these are the first section that is deemed important for the fraud examination report. So whom the report is from and who the report is addressed to. So these are the important. Secondly, is number two, the background information and the authority. Why the report has been, why the investigation has been conducted and why the report is compiled and for what reason and who gave the powers. If it's from a court-sanctioned investigation, then we should put there as the authority. So this is what the background information and the authority. Where is it coming from? Or is it for the purpose of prosecution? Or is it for the purpose of internal requirement by a company, required by the board of directors, for example? So this is for number one and number two. For number three is actually we put down the summary of the entire report's findings. So we probably put, say, number one summarizes few paragraphs of the entire investigation. Secondly, we can talk about the methods that have been implemented to gather information and to involve investigation of suspects, etc., and then the tests that have been used to conduct the investigation. So as you know, we've already covered the block writer and the TX1, as well as the autopsy and the extraction of data. So these are important for the methods and the tests used. So we can discuss the tools and the methodology that is implemented to gather the information. And then professional standards. So normally accountants and other professions, they are guided by standards. So standards where professionals are abide to and not abide to the clients or abide to other third-party influences. So the second part of the executive summary, the third, is to put in the details of the professional standards used, and also we can summarize the results. So here the results can be summarized as well in the executive summary of the significant findings of the investigation. So these are what are required under the executive summary. So secondly, we can go on to talk about the scope and the objectives. So what are the scope and what's the objective? What is it the investigation is going to achieve? So we probably snapshot the requirement of the TOR, or what is it for, and how you're going to gather everything, every information. And as well, we can put in the limitations that have been involved in the process of planning as well as executing the investigation. And the other section is number 5. So number 5 is basically to look at the approach. So the approach is actually who are the team involved, expertise involved. So we can also detail the procedures and the methods implemented, and also we can detail the tests performed, and also we can be more detailed in the evidences collected, and also what do you vouch in a company, company corporate documents, what have you. Accountants, they normally refer to vouching. For example, you go through a detailed scenario of the general ledger of a company, the transactions involved, the processes, the agreements, the contracts, what documents have been involved. So these are referred as to the vouching. So how we approach it, do you do it 100%, for example, checking of all transactions, or is it by means of the TOR that's placed for you to do your vouching, or is it 100% vouching? So these are the kinds of things that are required under the vouching. Documents reviewed, we have it's also important that all the documents that have been accessed for reviewed, they also need to be put down so that people can see that the information that have been covered in the report. And also, if there are observations that you cannot be able to quantify and substantiate with evidences, you can also go for the observation. So observations are there, and it's also should be part of the approach, and also the interviews conducted, the detailed interviews conducted, the procedure, the processes, and the people involved. All these steps should be taken into account. And also I put their eye for other matters that you probably require to be of interest to the approach that you have implemented or you have been engaged to conduct the investigation. So these are the things that will at least throw less doubts to the people who are interpreting the report and as well relying on the results of the findings. So section number 6 is about findings. So findings again, and before the findings, reiterate on the methodology used, or if you think that it's very, very repetitive, we can get rid of it because it's also been covered by the approach and executive summary. And as well, the detailed test performed, we also discussed there. So if you think that it is very repetitive, we can also reduce the test performed in B. And vouching, I think it is very important to reiterate the detail of your vouching because that's where the foundation of your findings will come from. So in terms of CID, it's referring to the evidence is collected, and this evidence is important because it's been supported by what have been done in the vouching, and so they should capture the summary of each finding of what you did for different sections of evidences and different sections of vouching that's been taking place. And also this whole summary here, this whole thing here, especially the vouching evidence and summary of each finding, they should be at least captured in a summary down here. And this also detailed in the executive summary. So this executive summary has to be tied also to the C, D, and E, the vouching evidences and the summary involved. And also, you can also put in recommendations. So recommendation could point out the strength and the internal weaknesses of the internal control system that been found by the lead investigators, and as well you can do referral legal counsel to the report, and also make a recommendation if the report can be suitably referred to authorities if it's for that purpose, depending on the TOR. And also don't forget in fraud examination report, it also has to be exhibits. So whatever you detail here in terms of the evidence is collected, that they should be also filed, and they are filed reference to what's actually been conducted in the investigation. So your exhibits should be copies of documents and the interview scripts. So when we do the interview here, the interview conducted here, when we do the interview and also detail in the findings, these interviews need to be transcribed and also be part of the exhibition of the report. And also in the exhibition, it should be detailed, at least a summary or a attachment of the brief resume of each fraud investigator that have been part of the team, and as well as the supporting documents used by report. So this fraud investigation report template or content is actually extracted from this Hopwood book that's published in 2000 and 2012. So this book can be accessed in the references. So here we have the references. Hopwood wrote this forensic accounting and fraud examination. So it was actually detailed from the report. So that's was it in terms of the content of this fraud investigation, fraud examination report. Now, before I move on to the other one, which is internal audited report content, the fraud investigation report or other report that is generated for the purpose of board that's related to fraud examination and investigation, they also be creative, as I say. We should able to document everything. So probably during your investigation, you covered something that is not captured in this report. So this is very, very important that they should be captured, and you continue to detail more, especially in terms of the under the approach, what have been covered, the additional evidences that have been covered that should be detailed. For example, evidences and vouching and loan, it can take at least 10 pages in an approach, because this evidences and vouching is huge part of this report, and so the findings is just a summary, but the detail of what actually be conducted and implemented in terms of supporting the investigation, and they are actually contained here. So I should add, I think in terms of the exhibits, after the exhibits we should put something like the references. So as I detailed in the last page of this presentation, references are very important. So here, this is an example of a references that captured as part of your work. So I think there should be a section that details the references in the last section of the report. So that was it about the internal fraud examination report. So the other one is internal audit report. Internal audit report is actually a report that is only performed for the sake of people within a company. So normally it's authorized by a head of department, authorized by the board of directors, or authorized by the GM. So it's not authorized, but it's, in other companies it's not authorized, but it is also regularized based on the internal audit framework of a company. So the content of an internal audit report, based on what I've just said, is again it has to be as a section. So another section, the first section is the address section, which involves the report, where the report is coming, whom the report is from, and who the report is to address to, and also the authority of the report. So with the executive summary, it's the summaries of what the users would normally want to hear from an internal finding within a company, and the key summaries will be, as well as mention the audit objectives and coverage. So normally audit objectives and coverage, they are detailed in an audit framework of any company or organization. So within the audit framework, there are objectives. So the objectives and the coverage need to be here, stated here. So take, for example, in a company that have a lot of business cycles, ranging from the payment controls, revenue controls, as well as the HR hiring, promotion, etc., etc. These are cycles captured in a audit framework. So this audit framework, once you capture one of the objectives of an audit framework to do the investigation, it should be also covered in the section C. And as well, the last part is the summary of the overall conclusion. So this will detail, example, the strengths and the weaknesses of internal controls, the improvement, for example, the area that you've been audited need to be improved. So this is it for the final part of the executive summary. The scope and objectives, what the investigated was the investigation, what the investigation aims to achieve and accomplish. So the scope objective is, again, it's always tie back to the objectives as well as the audit framework. and then what these objectives is now aimed to achieve and accomplish. So normally, if, for example, if you target a expenditure cycle investigation, the objective is to reduce the risk associated with wastage of money due to non-compliance. Just an example. So, and also we can also state here the limitations that have been involved. So if you have difficulties, for example, in acquiring and accessing to documents, you can also put them as limitations. Or you have, probably resistance from other internal offices in terms of information request, timeline in terms of timeline of responses to your request to acquire information. These are all scopes and objectives that should be part of the limitations. So Section 5 is the introduction and incorporating the reason in conducting the internal audit. So as I said, when it's sanctioned by any manager or the board of directors outside of your audit framework, you can also put in the reasons of conducting the internal audit. Otherwise, it should be mentioned something that is complied with the organization's internal audit framework. The number 2, state the objectives. If you think that the objectives have been clearly designed and mentioned in Section 4, we can omit this one. So again, the audit approach. So the audit approach is normally in the way you are approaching the audit. So the guidelines and the type of methods that you use to gather information and request to access to information and how you access it. So these are the kinds that have been covered, kind of things that have been covered under audit approach. The other one is the internal audit coverage. Like I said, it depends on the cycle or business cycle that you are covering. So internal audit coverage is basically sometimes it's more than 2 cycles. So if you think that it's 1 cycle of a business cycle in a business unit, you can also mention here, so that the limitations as well as the scope of the internal audit is within the audit coverage, and also the criteria used. So the criteria used, you can extend it that your approach should be, cover the set of policy, procedures, and requirements, and these are the things that should be covered under criteria. So there's a note here that criteria is as a reference against which audit evidence is compared. So basically the scope is who and what, and when criteria is what you are auditing against, whether it's standard or internal procedures. So these are what criteria means. So if you are targeting something that related set of policies, as I said, it can be a business cycle within an organization. So the criteria can be also mentioned here. So the 6th section, a section that will be looking at each area that have been looked at in the audit. So you probably want to discuss about the issues addressed and discuss in detail about the parts of the organization that have been audited and description of the work done to reflect to back the audit findings of your investigation, and as well the result of the findings. The last one is the specific recommendations, for example, best practice or findings recommendation against measure criteria. So normally recommendations they actually detail as you do the audit. So if you continue with the audit and then you come up with an issue, you can slot in a recommendation. So probably name the recommendation 1 for finding 1, recommendation 2 for finding 2, and recommendation 3 finding 3, etc. So these are the use of recommendations. So why recommendations are pinned to findings? Because it's easier for you to finish off with your recommendation with a summary at the end of the report. So like I said, you can finish off by conclusion as well as list of recommendations for auditors' responses. So auditee here can refer to the departments that you're auditing or the sections that you're auditing. So recommendations to the areas that they need to improve on. So you can always state here, but it also has to be in line or aligned to the current work investigations that have been done here in the job implementation progress. So the list of recommendation is basically the summary of the recommendations that you have done for each findings as you proceed with the investigation. And then don't forget, we need a conclusion. So that's it in terms of the internal audit. So let's recap here. The fraud examination report content is for forensic accountants who actually conducted a fraud investigation based on the demand either required by the courts, required by the board of directors, or required by the general manager or any higher officer in an organization. So it normally involves someone that is much more independent outside from an organization to come and do the job. Internal audit is actually different. It's someone within, so it's sanctioned within, and normally organizations, they have internal auditors. So the auditors will actually proceed within their internal work. So we can't argue here on which is more robust or which is more independent, but it is the practice, because internal auditors are also guided by the internal auditors standards. And fraud examination are also guided by forensic accountants through the CPA, and as well as the certified examination as certified fraud examination standards. So these are the kind of standards required from this. But for expert witness report, it's kind of a tricky area. Before I discuss this, I think I need to go straight to what really some of the laws in terms of expert report required. So expert witness report actually is required by some laws in some jurisdictions. So in Solomon Islands, for example, Evidence Act 2001, it actually defined what is evidence. Before an expert witness report is detailed, there is a need to understand what is evidence. So evidence as defined by the Evidence Act 2009, it says that it is the propensity evidence, which means that evidence that tends to show a person's propensity to act in a particular way, or to have a particular state of mind, being evidence of act or use of events or circumstances with which a person is alleged to have been involved. So this is defined as evidence under this act. And also there is another definition: opinion evidence is by an expert witness, so it must be supported by scientific knowledge. So we try to understand scientific knowledge by understanding the way information are gathered. So in terms of gathering accounting information, it is more easier than gathering information from a digital perspective. So we have covered the areas of the underlying criteria or guidance to compile information related to digital. So we've already gone through that. So these are the type of scientific knowledge that's required from opinion evidence. So opinion evidence is it's referring to the supported scientific method to do your opinion, or if it's not a scientific type evidence to be collected, like a normal in accounting or other documents that captured through reports of the fraud examination, it is much easier. So again, propensity evidence as well as opinion evidence, they are also defined in this act. And although in this act under section 33 expert report, it actually allows expert report to be written. So in section 33 it says that it needs the person's name. It needs the person's name, states the person and the specialized knowledge and training that this person has, and also the study and experience, as well as this should be specified in the report. It should set out an opinion that holds that the person holds, and that is expected to be wholly or substantially based on their knowledge. So first, I think section 33 asks to actually vector or verify the qualification of this person who will stand as an expert witness, and also to write a report. And normally my report are required. So here 28 expert witness report are required within 28 days for disclosure under Rule 20 by the High Courts. In terms of magistrate, it will be 21 days before pre-trial conferences. So this disclosure, advance disclosure, has to be made before the trial conference. And under Section 3, it also states that the court may, if it thinks fit, summon experts. So expert witness can be able to justify or testify in court about the results that have been conducted. And also, Section 130, it says that the expert witness has to put in an opinion based on the findings that he or she has been investigation. So expert witness, there should be a section on expert opinion based on the findings of the facts that have been investigated. Section 47 of the Act look at the evidence, which can be narrated form. So narrated form is something that you can detail the evidences for the purpose of easy interpretation by the jurisdiction or the courts. And also Section 48, it allows for the use of summaries if they are too technical into a simple language, as well as the use of charts to support the investigation. So it allows for the use of charts as well as summaries. Section 87, it actually looks as it allows for the references of documents and use of documents to be part and supporting the evidences that will be involved. Court also allows summary of long and complex documents. So if you have a long or complex document, court allows under Section 90 for an expert witness to summarize them for the purpose of the interpretation and reliance. Section 102 is actually deal with banker's affidavit. So if we actually getting information from the bank in terms of the suspect's bank accounts, as well as the books or documents that related to opening of customers' records, these are also required and also acceptable by the court under Section 102. Other things that's required under Section 33 is COC. COC is the chain of custody. Chain of custody, it's the information that have been gathered along with the evidence collection and the evidence form, as well as the hash verification, especially with digital forensic, hash verification, as well as recalculation and other technical issues. So these are sort of technical matters or subjects or evidences that needs to be properly documented to support this Section 133. In other jurisdictions, especially Tonga, it includes books and literature and reports. So you can also conduct a literature and always involve books and literature in a report and refer to treaties, qualification and experience, facts and sources of facts, and opinion conveyed, and your signature. Put your signature as part of the expert witness report, and also be sufficient in terms of your advance disclosure. So it's kind of equally same in terms of the implementation. So this is actually what an expert report means in terms of what the court requires. Now, from these, we can also be creative and make a really a thorough investigation, and then we can also capture the type of information collected, evidence, documents collected, and then we can also be creatively create information and content that actually function alongside the requirement of Section 133. So these are the type of things that expert witnesses, forensic accountants who will be expert witness report for reporting of such cases. So when we expanded the expert report under section 133 and other sections that we discuss here, it can look something very comprehensive. So if we go to one example of a digital forensic expert witness report is here. So just look at the table of content. We have the introduction. So this is actually captured the preparers and summary background of the case, summary of my summary of the expert witness conclusion, and documentation of the expertise who were involved in the expert witness report, and also what are the guiding principles, the guiding principles that supporting the investigation. So as I said, normally forensic accountants, they're guided by certified expert, certified fraud examination principles, and forensic accountants, professional accountants. Some of them, they are guided by the CPA and CA code of conduct. So these are the guiding instructions and principles that you can put in here. So chain of custody, we've talked about it, is a document that serves to support all the evidences and those who at least put their hands on top of evidences as well as to storage. And the other section on this is the documentation of the crime scene photos and images and what items are seized during the investigation. The blocker, it refers to my discussion on the TX1 imager. It's actually the hardware digital forensic that used to retrieve a suspect's hard drive information into your system for computer analysis. And also the imaging of the disk or the hard disk, so what system you use. So we've discussed autopsy, for example, so you can put autopsy here, or you can also detail autopsy here, and as well the interview and the image analysis. So we've covered autopsy as well as the output of the autopsy, as well as capture any person that you did the interview, and this is what you capture under the autopsy. So during the whole process, your findings and what you found during the investigation, as well as the targeted, expected investigation, you can always detail here. So it can be varied, depends on your findings, whatever finding that related to your financial fraud or your targeted, probably something related to gender violence, just an example. So you can capture interviews here, capture your image, analyze his findings from there, and then you can also detail the reshapes and other approaches that have been taken. And I've said the section 133 requires an opinion, and normally an opinion is concluding of facts. What facts give you the opinions, and also your express opinions. So these are the things that one has to actually do in order to comply with section 133 or a equivalent section under your jurisdiction. So from this, we can also capture that you need to put a statement of compliance. Statement of compliance, it means that you comply to the law, comply to the guidance of your professional requirement, and also declare if there is a statement of conflict of interest, and statement of your duty, and declaration of truth. So remember, there must be appendices. So appendices, it's actually look at the statement of methodology that have been implemented, and the competency, experience of the team that have been involved, and also the details of any material that have been accessed, relied, and the signature literature that have been used to support the report. So, and other appendix is the photographs or schedule or diagrams or graph or other graphic things, and also the detail of your blocker. Blocker is the TX1 imager or other evidences, and also we can talk about the autopsy. Just anything, for example, we've been dealing with autopsy, You can also detail the autopsy software in here. Why are you using it? So these are the things that have been attached in the report to support the findings. So these are actually the attachments towards the support of your concluding facts. So beside this, there are other things like, okay, you can talk about suspects conduct. So these are all supported photographs and galleries. And also the other section is to at least do a chronological analysis of the timing involved in terms of the when it was given the authority, and as well as when you finish off the closing of the investigation. So the processes involved, significant timing that have been involved to deal with this, they should be captured as well. So all the evidences in terms of chain of custody, they should be supported and also filed, and also the figures that have been detailed in the report. So this is just an example. I will also put everything there for download, so you can access every material for your template, as well as to begin your template for investigation. So yeah, this is it in terms of the witness expert report. So if we go up here, I think I have detailed something that is equivalent to what I've just explained. So what I have just explained in terms of digital forensic witness expert report is just this same document. So when I talk about the summary background, this is the summary background, and preparers, these are the preparers, and summary of investigation conclusion. This is the one, and those involved, the team involved here, and also the principle. So normally you are guided by whatever principle, the law that is required. You can also put the law here. I've talked about that already. And also the chain of custody, why it is important, and why you also put that in the appendix. So it also refers to the appendix on figures 46 to 52. So these are the example of doing a report that this is also in terms of the information that is seized during the crime scene. They also need to be detailed. You have photographed, but then you have the information that relate to the information that you image and captured. So a lot of things, but these are the summary of what is expected. So I think this is it for the witness expert report. But based on your jurisdiction, based on your practice, based on what's been done in your prosecution offices, as well as other law enforcement agencies, if you feel comfortable with the way you are doing with the reporting, that's okay. You can always adopt that. But this is also an example of what is required in terms of the 3 areas that have been explained, based on the laws of the countries that I do the presentation on behalf. But then you can also rely on the laws of the jurisdiction to at least see what the content of an expert witness report is. Thank you.